Hello. It feels to me like a lot of the large scale and political conflicts in the world today stem in part, not fully, but in part from a kind of crisis of modern masculinity that over the past century or so, we have seen a gradual shift from a predominantly patriarchal culture to one which is much more diverse and inclusive. And for some men, this has created a lot of insecurity about how to be a man in the world today. And for some men, this has pushed them to more reactionary positions. And we can see that in political leaders who are also reflective of large swaths of men in the population in the world today. And so it seems to me like a way to start working through this and understanding it is to understand what it actually means to be a man, to inhabit a body with all of its attendant desires, and what it means to inhabit masculinity in the world today. And I just read a book which gives a lot of insight and meaning and poignancy to this, even though I am a man who I've inhabited a man's body throughout my entire life, but I feel like this is really giving me a much better understanding of this. So the novel is Flesh by David Szalay, and this story follows one man, Istvan, who is born in Hungary, and we follow him from his adolescence and reaching puberty throughout many different stages of his life, throughout going to prison, of going to war, of becoming a father, of reaching the upper echelons of high finance and business, and into his later life, and through following him throughout these many different stages, it really tapped me into what it means to inhabit a body in this way and to be a man, and I found it so fascinating, especially because I think it's deceptively simple what he does in this story. Istvan is a very straightforward man. He seems in some ways to be very passive, that things just kind of happen to him in his life, but then gradually he develops a lot more agency, and even though he seems so straightforward or simple on the outside, his personality develops a lot more nuance and complexity, and there's a greater richness of his interior life, which is gradually revealed through following him through different sections, and it kind of moves throughout his life between these different sections, and so there are spaces in between which aren't narrated in the story, but which we have to kind of imaginatively fill out. And it was interesting reading an interview with this author where he described how he wanted to give a sense to the reader that they had read a great big epic life, as if the book was 1,000 pages, but instead we get these different sections, and so the book is a lot shorter. It's only like 350 pages or so, and following him, it's so poignant because he seems on the outside to just be so fragile, and in how early on in his life things just happen to him, and I think it's something that we see when often when looking at adolescent boys, that they may seem on the surface that there isn't a lot going on, that especially throughout stages of puberty, that they are so driven often by sex and desire, but it shows how the desires which are attendant to his body and being in the body of a man aren't just about sexual desire and the libido, but are also about a desire for power and respect and for control in his life, and it shows that throughout the different stages in a diverse way, and it gradually builds up to a larger understanding of his being and his life, and part of the way that on the surface he seems so simple is that in a lot of the dialogue in this book, he is so monosyllabic in his responses that someone will ask him a question, and he'll just say, okay, fine, okay, yeah, and that's a lot of his responses, but there is a lot more that is going on underneath the surface, and I think that's gradually shown over the course of the narrative, and following his story, and the various degrees to which he has agency in his life, that sometimes he finds himself in circumstances which are kind of beyond his control, or they kind of spiral out of control, and sometimes he takes a very active part, whether that be for good or for bad, and so he comes across as quite a complex character, even though he is, has this very straightforward demeanor to to himself, and so I found it so powerful following him throughout these various different stages, and especially when it gets to a part where he becomes a father, and he views his own adolescent son, and sees in his son and understands through his son's things about himself that he didn't necessarily understand when he was becoming a man himself, and was just kind of thrown into this experience and was carried along on the desires that his body demanded of him, and there's this really curious way of when he's reflecting on this and describing this process of adolescence, when he is reflecting on his state of fatherhood, and he thinks back on these ages of 11, 12, 13, and he writes, "The surprising new things his body wanted, and his inability to refuse it when it wanted them, and all that burgeoning physicality is held within yourself as a sort of secret, even as it is also the actual surface that you present to the world, so that you're left absurdly exposed, unsure whether the world knows everything about you or nothing, because you have no way of knowing whether these experiences that you're having are universal or entirely specific to you." And I found it so fascinating, this way of looking at the interior life versus the exterior life, and how people see him, what they expect from him, what they view him as a kind of stereotypical man. But within himself, he is struggling with all of these sensations and feelings, and not knowing whether they are particular to him, or if everyone is going through this, and he is just experiencing this himself. And so I've read the author's previous book, All That Man Is, and really enjoyed that book as well. But something I thought that was so interesting about it was that in that book, which is really a collection of short stories about many different men, and it is also exploring issues to do with masculinity in many different examples, and though these are all different short stories, I felt like any one of them could have been expanded out into a full novel, and I feel like that's kind of what we get with this book, that with the case of Istvan, we get his full life, but he continues on writing it through these series of just focusing on different episodes of his life. And so there's a lot of drama to the story in what is revealed and the twists and turns in the story. And there's some very dramatic things which occur. But then, as I've been talking about, there's also a lot of subtlety and shades to his personality and interior life, which are gradually revealed over the course of following his story. And I felt like this reminded me of so much great literature and other forms of exploring manhood and masculinity throughout literature. So it partly made me think of Dickens' work and as a kind of coming of age story and someone who comes from very humble beginnings, working up into the upper echelons of society and charting his rise and fall. But it also reminded me somewhat of Dostoevsky's work in which is a gradual inquiry into morality and the choices people make and exploring what agency we have within our lives to enact change within our own lives and in the larger world around us through these different dramatic plots. And it also reminded me so much in its use of dialogue of the novel The Road by Cormac McCarthy, where there is a lot of dialogue in this and in Flesh, but not much is actually being said. What is being said is fairly simple and straightforward, and yet it becomes imbued with so much emotion in what is being left unsaid, which I think is such an incredible skill, and I've not come across any use of dialogue in this in novels. I don't think since reading the Road, and so Flesh feels so accomplished in how it does that, but also in creating a sense of place and how Istvan doesn't feel that he can naturally inhabit either Hungary, where he grows up, or London, where he eventually moves to. That there's a sense of discomfort in both of these physical spaces, and so the place to where he can find a sense of home, both with relationships and having relations with women, but also creating a physical sense of home and a place to inhabit, as well as inhabiting this sense of manhood. And also the novel Flesh reminded me of a more recent novel of Solenoid, in how it explores this border between the interior and exterior, especially for a man. And there were a couple of lines from Solenoid which felt like they could have been in Flesh as well, where he describes my mind dressed in flesh, my flesh dressed in the cosmos, that there is this interior self to us, but then there is also the exterior, the physical body, which is literally made up of the stuff of the cosmos. And also when discussing going into the army, he writes, "The army did not make me a man, but it did increase my introversion and aloneness. Looking back, I wonder how I survived." And again, this line from Solenoid feels like it could have been taken from Flesh, especially the way that the protagonist enters into the army, and we don't see much of his experience of actually being in the army, but we feel the trauma of it and the repercussions of it throughout the years going forward. And in some ways it kind of steals him and for the living in the greater world, and makes him less vulnerable from an interior perspective, but at the same time it increases his isolation and and a sense of distance between himself and the larger world around him. And I found it so moving how it describes that experience and shows the reverberations of it throughout his life. So overall, I felt this was a really extraordinary novel, and one that that on initially reading it, it might feel quite simple in what it's doing, but it's left me with a lot of questions and things to ponder, and it creates this kind of haunting sense to it, and following the life of a man who seems fairly ordinary, and how he vacillates between wanting to be a hero and the hero of his own story, and to fall back into a kind of ordinariness and being insubstantial and anonymous, and how it explores that tension, I think is so fascinating and so well done. So I'd love to hear if you have read this book and what you think of it, and if you agree with me or disagree with me, or if you're interested in reading it now, or if you've read anything else by this author, because as I mentioned, I've only read his previous book, All That Man Is, but I would like to read more of his work now, because I think he's an incredibly talented author and does belong in the line of a number of other authors that I mentioned. But thank you for watching me discuss this, and I hope you're doing well and reading good things, and I will speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.